Good evening. A very warm welcome, and of course I mean that literally, to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York. I'm Karen Taylor. I'm the Program Director of the General Society. I'm so pleased to welcome you here this evening, this is actually our first lecture of the 2017-2018 series, and it is part of the Labour, Literature and Landmark Lectures. The Labour, Literature and Landmark Lectures are supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. I also want to take this opportunity to express our appreciation, our heartfelt appreciation for our window designer and curator, Thomas Donoghue, who over the past 2016-17 series has created 24 wonderful and exquisite windows. He has also designed the spectacular windows for this evening's program, and if you haven't seen them, I encourage you to have a look. There are external windows outside the building. And he also the display on the registration table. And I really like, where are you, Thomas? Thank you so much. For those of you less familiar with the General Society, a brief introduction. The General Society was founded in 1785. That is over 232 years ago. Today, we continue to serve and improve the quality of life of the people of New York City through our educational and cultural programs. These include our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, of course, which you're in this evening, our upstairs Lock Museum, and I encourage you to have a look afterwards, and our nearly 200-year-old lecture series, of which tonight's lecture is part of. You will find some general information on our newsletter, which was on your seat. It'll give you some background information on the Society. Now, tonight's program is such a special event. It is the book launch for Hook's Tale, the rollicking debut novel from award-winning playwright and screenwriter John Pielmeier, which reimagines the childhood of the much-maligned Captain Hook, his quest for buried treasure, his friendship with Peter Pan, and the story behind the swashbuckling world of Neverland. And a reminder, you will be able to purchase this book after tonight's talk. John Leonard Pielmeier is an award-winning playwright and screenwriter whose projects have been nominated for Emmys 3 times and a Golden Globe, and whose actors have been nominated and sometimes won Emmys, Tonys, and Academy Awards. His successful plays, television, movies, and mini-series includes Agnes of God, Gifted Hands, Choices of the Heart, The Memory Keeper's Daughter, and the successful screen adaptation of Ken Follett's The Pillars of the Earth. He's received the Humanitas Award, plus 2 nominations, 5 Writers Guild nominations, a Gemini nomination, an Edgar Award, the Cammy Award, and the Christopher Award. He is married to Irene O'Garden and lives in upstate New York. Hook's Tale is his first novel. It is now my huge pleasure to introduce to you John Pielmeier. John, thank you.
Thank you so much. I need to wet my whistle here. Thank you so much for coming. Those of you who missed Horace Greeley, who spoke here some time back, can get to hear me. I want to give before I begin, some very quick and heartfelt thank yous to Karen Taylor and the General Society, an amazing building, and thank you for allowing me to do this and welcoming me here. I have to once again thank Thomas Donoghue, my good friend, who made it all possible. Mark Lacko, my good friend, and Thomas and Mark helped design the windows and the lights and put all this together. I want to thank Scribner for publishing this book. John Glynn, who is here, who was the editor who bought this book at Scribner, and Jeremy Price, who was the publicist at Scribner, who kind of helped launch this thing going. Thank you so much. Rosie Mahorter, I don't know if Rosie's here, but she's the publicist at Scribner right now. And my agent, Jeff Schmidt, who, when he read this book, said, "I promise you I will get this published." And he did, and thank you, Jeff, for that. I have to thank all of you, my friends and strangers who have come here tonight for being here. I'm just so thrilled and over the moon about this. It's so exciting, and of course, especially my wife, Irene, without whom I'd be in a puddle on a street corner somewhere. Which brings me, Pardon me? Oh yes, turn off your cell phones if you feel like it. Which brings me to, I want to talk very briefly before I read about how Hook's Tale came about, and there are two versions of that. About 2.5 years ago, Irene and I went on a cruise to the South Seas. And the cruise went from Valparaiso, Chile, to Tahiti, stopping at Easter Island and Pitcairn Island, which I was very excited about. But the very first stop on the cruise was a very small island that I knew nothing about, called Robinson Crusoe Island, which is owned by Chile. And Robinson Crusoe Island is the island on which Alexander Selkirk was marooned. Selkirk was a British sailor who in 1701 or something like that was on a British merchant ship in the Pacific, and he went to the captain and said, "This ship is in really bad shape. It's going to sink if we don't go into a port and fix it." And the captain said, "Forget about it. If you're not happy, leave." And so he left. He was sort of a voluntary maroonee. They put him on this empty island where he lived for 4 years. The merchant ship then went off and sailed and indeed did sink, and everybody died. And Selkirk was on the island for 4 years. It was a very rocky, jungly island. And every day, the island was divided by a mountainous divide, and every day he'd hike up to the top of the mountains on this little island and light a bonfire. And after 4 years, somebody saw him and rescued him, brought him back to England, and the newspapers fell in love with him. He was really the first celebrity survivor after Jonah. And he was quite a phenomenon. And a man named Daniel Defoe heard his story, and he said, "Oh, this could be an interesting retelling." So he wrote Robinson Crusoe. So the island now it's quite small. There's a very small town on the island, and the only thing to do on this island is to hike. There's some gorgeous hikes. So our cruise ship dropped us off, and Irene and I started on a hike up to the mountainous, rocky point where Selkirk would light his bonfires. It was a very vigorous hike. And about halfway up, we stopped to catch our breath, and I turned around, and there in the distance, in the bay, was our cruise ship. And suddenly, this came to me in an unbelievable flash. That I thought, wait a minute. Selkirk went back to England, described this island, and it was probably mapped, this is all of my imagination, was mapped by the newspaperman. Defoe then took Selkirk's map and designed the map for Robinson Crusoe's island based on Selkirk's map. Years later, Robert Louis Stevenson, who adored Defoe, sort of based the Treasure Island map on the Defoe map, which was based on the Selkirk map. And then J.M. Barrie, who adored Robert Louis Stevenson, based Neverland on Treasure Island, and so forth. And suddenly, and this took like 5 seconds, I thought, oh my God, I'm hiking on Neverland. And it suddenly made sense. This was a very jungly island. And I thought, oh, now I understand why Hook couldn't find Peter Pan's tree, the underground home. It was impossible to find anything on this island. And we hiked up to the top of this mountainous divide and looked over this other end, and there was a lagoon. It was the Mermaid's Lagoon, was on the other side. And up north was a promontory where Tiger Lily's village was. So it suddenly made tremendous sense to me. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. This island, the actual island, is part of an archipelago, and there's Hook's ship out in the bay. was Neverland part of an archipelago? Where did Hook sail? Hook wasn't there all the time. Where else did he sail? Who was he pirating if he was a pirate? You have to sink some ships if you're going to be a pirate. So suddenly and why doesn't Hook fly, and how did he get here? So I started asking myself all of these questions, and as soon as I got home from this cruise, I sat down and I started writing this book, and that's what you're going to hear a little bit from tonight. The other version of how this book came about was that I was in a library in college and that I worked at. It was a library, a tiny room that nobody used. And one day, all the students went in and fell asleep. And one day I decided to just clean up the library because the shelves were very dusty. And I came across this manuscript. And I took it to my boss, who was my playwriting teacher, and I said, look what I found. And he said, you can have it. So years later, I looked at this manuscript, and this is what I discovered. That's version 2. So, as you now know, Hook's Tale is a memoir written in the first person by Captain Hook. And his version of the story is very different from the one that you may be familiar with. I'm going to read you the beginning of chapter 4. But a lot happens before then, so I need to give you a very quick summary of the salient points that you'll need for reference. We first meet our hero when he's an orphan at age 14 and living in London. He runs away from school to find his father's family. His father was lost at sea before he was born. His father was a captain, a sea captain, who was lost at sea. And our young hero decides to find his father's family and find out more about his father. Before he can get there, he is press-ganged onto a British Navy ship. And on the ship, he discovers, through reasons I won't go into, a treasure map that leads the ship and its crew to a mysterious archipelago. In the meantime, he takes part in a mutiny. He adopts a baby crocodile that he names Daisy and keeps in his pocket. He's found guilty of neglecting his night watch duties when his ship is attacked by an enemy vessel called the Princess Alice. And this is important because that's the name of the ship on which his father disappeared 14 years before. As punishment for his negligence of his night watch duty, he's condemned to death in the burning wreckage of the Alice. He's tied to the mainmast and the ship is set on fire. He succeeds in getting out of his ties, but the only place for him to go is to climb up to the crow's nest. So he manages to climb up there, and he writes, "Black smoke rose like the hand of the reaper, wrapping its fingers around my neck and choking the life from me. I heard a cock crow, signaling death, the final hour, the dawn of my new life. And the next thing I knew, I was in the arms of an angel, and we were flying over the water to heaven." Chapter 4. I realized I was still alive when we flew no closer to the clouds of heaven, but instead began to descend. Oh no, I thought, what have I done to deserve the fiery pit? Then I noticed that my rescuer had no wings. This was no angel, I determined. I panicked, and for a moment I struggled in his arms, but he held me all the tighter, and I realized that giving in to the unknown might be better than plunging hundreds of feet into the ocean. As we flew, I studied him more closely. He appeared to be a boy of 12 or thereabouts. His face was smooth, and his hair was curly brown, but it could have been dirt that gave it its color, for it was tousled, and I could see that he seldom, if ever, washed it. Nor from the smell of him did he wash much else. He never cast his eyes, brown with flecks of gold, in contrast to my own periwinkle blue, on me, but only on the horizon, as if he were looking for some marker to give him direction. His lips were tight in concentration, so that 2 dimples dented the port and starboard of his mouth. His eyelashes were quite long, adding something girlish to his visage, though I would never tell him that. He would have murdered me. He was, so far as it is possible for any child to be, beautiful. He dipped even lower. At this point, I turned my gaze from his face and looked ahead. There appeared on the horizon a mountainous island, which rapidly grew closer. We circled it once, and as we did so, I spotted a lovely lagoon on the far western side, dotted with rocks upon which sea lions, or so I imagined, for I'd never seen those mammals in life but only in drawings, lounged. On the high cliffs to the north was what appeared to be a village of tents. Was this our destination? No, for we sailed over it and continued east in the direction from which we had just arrived, then spiraled lower and dove toward the island's middle, where the wilderness was thickest. The boy did not decrease his speed as we descended. Rather, we sped toward Earth as if he were bent on crushing us both into the jungle. But a few feet above the treetops, he somehow slowed, and we gently descended through leaves and lianas to the ground. He landed on his feet, and as soon as he touched dirt, he dropped me, as if quite suddenly he could no longer bear my weight. I landed with an oof. He laughed. "Thank you, kind sir," I said to him, once I'd caught my breath. "Oh, I'm not a sir," he said in proper English. "I'm a boy. My name's Peter. What's yours?" "James," I replied, and as I stood, I held out my hand for him to shake. He simply stared at it. "Are you giving me something?" he asked. "My hand," I replied. He seemed puzzled. "But there's nothing in it," he said. "Oh, I'm giving you my hand," I said again, uncertain how to make my intention clearer. "Please, take it." "I don't want it. I've two of my own." I thought he was joking, and I laughed. "Do you think I'm funny?" he asked sternly. "Well, I think what you said was funny." "Was it?" And now he laughed, and soon we both were laughing together. "I saw your house burning and that you were in trouble. I was playing hide and seek with Tink, else I would never have found you. It was her turn to hide, and sometimes she goes quite far away." "It wasn't my house, it was a ship," I explained, puzzled at his choice of words. "And who's Tink?" "Oh, you'll meet her soon enough. She's very irritating at times, but she's all I have to play with. Until now." He grinned, studying me head to toe as if I were his captive. "What is that?" He was pointing at my trousers. "Trousers?" I answered. It was now I noticed that he was clothed in leaves and mud with a few seashells dangling from a liana belt that barely served up a modicum of modesty. Had he dressed like that in London, he would have been arrested. "Trousers? But there's only one of them," he observed with grammatical correctness. "Well," I said, somewhat at a loss, "there are two legs." "Oh," was all he answered. "Where are we?" I asked, looking around. "Home," he said, and started walking away from me. I instantly followed. "Do you have a name for it?" "Home. I mean, the island. Home." "I see. What would you call it?" "Oh, I don't know. I've never been any place like this." "Never?" "No, never." "Then it's never to you, home to me." Before I could reply, a tremendous roar stopped me in my tracks. To starboard, at the foot of a large tree, was an enormous bear standing upright between us and two mewling cubs. Its teeth were long, its claws extended, and it waved its paws at us as if it were deciding how to divide our delicate morsels between itself and its offspring. I stood very still, then began quite carefully to back away. But the boy took a step closer to the monster. "Peter," I whispered. "Peter, don't." He ignored me, stepped even closer. The beast watched him. Everything was still. Then the bear leapt on the boy, knocked him onto his back, and proceeded to take his head in its jaws in preparation for the final crunch. I turned away, too frightened to watch, but felt myself a terrible coward, so turned back at the last moment, expecting to see the monster's teeth puncture his skull with a terrible pop. Imagine how surprised I was to see Peter pull from his liana belt a blunt stick with which he proceeded to stab the bear in its heart. The bear reared back, held one paw to the inflicted wound, then toppled onto its side with a pitiful scream. In a moment, all was over, and the two orphan cubs ran to their late parent, I did not know if it was a father or mother, and began to lick its face pathetically, crying as if to break my heart. I felt the tears spring to my eyes. I so identified with these poor young ones, only to turn astonished to a laughing Peter. "Boy, why are you crying?" he asked. "I, too, am an orphan," I declared. And before I could thank him for his brave actions in once again saving my life, I heard another roar, and lo, the bear was back on its feet. Not only does time stand still in this place, I remember thinking, but the dead walk again. The bear waddled toward Peter, and Peter jumped into its arms, and soon both were rolling in the jungle leaves, Peter laughing and the bear snorting in what I took to be its form of laughter. The cubs joined in, and after a time, while I watched gaping, Peter broke away and introduced us. "This is James," he said to the bear. "He's my new friend." The bear waddled toward me, and I backed away. "Why are you afraid?" Peter asked me. "It tried to kill you, and you killed it." "Oh, it's just a game. We play. Today it was my turn to win. Tomorrow it will be Barnaby's. Yesterday he pretended to gnaw off my leg and feed it to the children. Brilliant! Come along." And before I could react, he continued farther into the jungle. Barnaby snorted his farewell, or so I took it to mean, and I followed my new friend. In a few minutes, we arrived at a large deciduous tree, which towered above all the others. It was covered in pink and yellow blossoms and seemed quite out of place in the middle of a jungle. Peter pulled aside a bush nestled against its base to reveal a large hole in its trunk. He stepped into the hole, and I moved to follow. "No, this is mine," he said. He pointed to another bush. "That can be yours." He disappeared. I pulled aside the second bush and discovered another large hole. I carefully stepped inside and found my foot on the top rung of what I soon learned was a ladder. Gingerly, I descended. Reaching the bottom rung, I turned and beheld an oddly shaped room, tangled in roots and rocks and lit with burning candles. "Welcome," said Peter, for he had already arrived. From a tabletop made of a stump, he picked up a clay pipe and instantly lit its contents from a nearby candle. He took a puff and handed it to me. I put it to my mouth and inhaled, then exhaled quite suddenly, coughing. "Oh, you have to hold your breath. Let the smoke do its work," he instructed. I took another puff and held the smoke inside for as long as possible. "This is remarkable," I said, exhaling while looking around at the underground abode. "Did you dig this yourself?" I offered him back the pipe. He took another puff before speaking. "No, I had help," he answered, but offered no further explanation. "But where did you get the candles?" "Oh, a house landed on the beach yesterday," he said, "like the one you were burning in, but smaller. It was filled with candles." "Yesterday?" I asked, incredulous. "I think so," was his evasive answer. I soon learned that all past events happened yesterday for him, just as the only future before us, whether it was seconds or years ahead, was tomorrow. The tobacco we smoked was quite sharp, but held a lovely herbal aroma, and its effects grew on me quickly. I admit I rather liked it. "What is this tobacco? It's lovely. Where'd you get it?" I asked. "Oh, Panther gave it to me in exchange for a favor or something. They smoke it all the time." "Who's Panther?" I asked. "You'll meet him," he replied, "tomorrow." It was then that I felt a stirring in my trouser pocket. I reached in, pulled out Daisy, who was only now waking, having slept through the attack of the Alice, my imprisonment and trial, and ultimately my rescue. "Oh, this is Daisy," I said, holding her out toward Peter in the palm of my hand. He recoiled in terror. "Put it away! Put it away!" he screamed. "Oh, she won't harm you. She's so small she couldn't hurt you, even if she wished to. She's safer than Barnaby. Put it away!" I held it to my face, kissed the top of her head, and slipped her back inside my pocket. "Where'd it come from?" he asked, calming somewhat once she was out of sight. "Oh, I hatched her. I don't know if she's a her. I've only guessed." "No, I mean now. Where'd she come from now?" he asked again. "Are you a magician? Panther's brother is, but not as good as you." "What? No, I'm not a magician. She was in my pocket." "What's pocket?" I looked again at his skimpy costume. "You don't have them, do you?" I stood to show him mine and buried my hand in my starboard one. He screamed, "Where'd your hand go?" "Oh, it's right here," I said, pulling it out again. "How'd you make it disappear?" "Oh, I put it in my pocket, like the one I keep Daisy in." I disappeared my hand again. "Don't!" he cowered. "Please, put the Daisy away." "No, Daisy's in the other one. Here, look, I have two pockets. This one's empty." I turned it inside out. He marveled, as if I just turned straw to gold. "Do it again," he said. I did. "Oh, my," he asked. I'd like trousers someday, if they come with things like that in them." "Well, not all do, but most," I answered. He was pleased. "Perhaps Barnaby would like some too. What's an orphan?" he asked, abruptly changing the subject. He did this, I soon learned, with astonishing frequency. For a moment, I didn't understand. "You said when I killed Barnaby that you were an orphan." "Oh, yes, an orphan is someone who's lost his father and mother. Where'd you lose them? Did you put them in a pocket? No, I mean, they died. Ah, I see. When are they coming back? At the end of time, I said, remembering my catechism, when Christ comes to judge the living and the dead. Is that a friend of yours? Who? Christ. You don't know about Christ? No, do tell. You mean you haven't been saved? Oh, I've been saved many times. Barnaby saved me yesterday when I nearly fell off a cliff. Tink says she saved me, but she thinks too much of herself, wants me to like her more. I mean, have you not been baptized? I don't believe I have. Is it fun? I don't remember. I was quite small when I was baptized. They pour water on you and say special words. The mermaids pour water on me all the time. The mermaids? Yes, you'll meet them tomorrow. I paused to gather my wits again. I mean, well, if you were small when you were baptized, you wouldn't remember it either. Ah, of course. So I might have been baptized yesterday. I took a breath. Yes, I suppose so. Then, are you an orphan? Have your father and mother died? Suddenly a tear sprang to his eye. I don't know. Have they? Where are they? And now his lip quivered. I don't know. I don't think I ever had any. Well, of course you did. Everybody does. He wiped his cheeks, wrinkled his brow. Oh, I do remember someone. I think I called her mother. She was very large. Yes, they are at first. Well, she threw me out the window. Really? I gasped. No, I just made that up. I'm hungry. Let's eat. We spent the rest of the day wandering about the jungle and getting lost, or so Peter said, then finding the large tree again. Ever curious, I plied him with questions as we walked. How long have you been here? I only got here yesterday. How old are you? I think I'm your age. How old are you? 14, just. Yes, that seems about right. Well, when's your birthday? This stopped him in his tracks. He thought for a moment. Yesterday, he told me, then continued on. We stopped at some fruit bushes, and he began picking the berries. I followed suit. They were a deep purple. You're certain these aren't poison? I asked. Oh, but they are, he said as he popped some into his mouth. But won't you be sick? I asked, alarmed. Oh, they're not all poison, only every other one. He tossed a random few of them onto the ground. I tasted one. It was delicious. How do I know which is which? Oh, that's easy. If you eat one, it's not poison. You can't eat poison. It's vile. He moved toward a stream after he'd eaten his fill. Sunshine glinted off it, and a miniature rainbow sparkled at the foot of a tiny waterfall. It's beautiful. Does it have a name? The Serpentine. Really? Just like the one in London? I don't know. Are there serpents in London? Not the Serpentine. I don't think there are. I've never seen one. Then why call it the Serpentine? Well, why call this the... Oh! I now saw that what I'd taken for a rainbow was really a long snake, with all the colors of the rainbow gleaming on its back. It looked quite dangerous. Peter saluted it and moved on. Did you come here from England? I asked, watching to see if any serpents were following us. Well, of course I did. I'm not a barbarian. What's England? Oh, that's my home. Oh, then it's my never. I couldn't follow his logic. Who was Queen when you left? I asked. Queen? Was it Victoria? Oh, yes, that sounds right. Victoria Blackburn. I remember the name very well. No, Victoria Regina. Who's Victoria Blackburn? I think I remember my, mother? Telling Victoria Blackburn to watch me while mother went shopping. She threw me out the window. Peter, I admonished, and he laughed. I do think I remember a queen. Her name was Maud. Yes, she was queen when I left. Queen Maud? I tried to remember. Was there a Queen Maud? That must have been hundreds of years ago. No, it was only yesterday. Then he laughed again, and I stopped asking historical questions. Instead, I changed the subject. How do you fly? I think lovely thoughts. We'd returned to the tree, but instead of descending, he flung himself to the ground, lay back with one arm resting on his forehead. Really? Of course not. Don't be silly. There's a kind of sand. Tink gives it to me. She has a large supply of it. Who is Tink? I asked again, my frustration growing. I lay beside him. You'll meet her, I know, tomorrow. No, now. I expect she's given up on me trying to find her. We always meet up here. And here she is. I could see no one. Tink, this is James, he said, sitting up. I don't see her. Oh, she's right here. She thinks you're very handsome. Is she invisible? No, but she can be quite small at times. Say hello to her. Hello, Tink, I said, rising to greet her. She was nowhere to be seen. It's called trousers, he said illogically. It has pockets which are magic, and you can hide things in them. Then he explained, she doesn't know what you have on your legs. She's never seen anything so funny. He paused as if listening. She wants you to take them off so she can see you properly. No, I blushed. Oh, don't mind her. She can be very rude. But she's only a fairy. She's never been to England. He listened again. Ah, she says she has. Describe it then. Another pause followed, and he turned to me with a grin. She says there are hundreds and thousands of people. She's such a liar. Oh, but there are. That made him laugh. Do you like to lie too? I love it. It's such fun, especially if others believe you. Like telling them you've sprinkled them with flying sand, and then they walk off a cliff and fall. He giggled. This was the first inkling I had of his darker nature. Oh, look what you have! He pointed to something on the ground beside me. What? I could see nothing. Panther's one of those too. I don't have one, but I'd like one. One what? One of those! He pointed to the ground beside me again. I don't see anything, I insisted. Are you blind? It's right beside you. That dark thing. What dark thing? It's hooked to your feet. Oh, my shadow. It was then that I noticed he had none. Is that what it's called? I want it. Could you lend it to me just till tomorrow? I don't think I can detach it. It's not physical, Peter. It happens when the sun... At that I looked up and realized the sun had set and darkness was quickly descending. Still my shadow was quite distinct. Tiger Lily says it makes one solid and real, he announced with confidence. Who's Tiger Lily? Is she a friend of Tink's? Oh, no. At any rate, she has a... What is it? Shadow. Oh, yes, she has one too. So does Barnaby. If I had one, I must have lost it yesterday. I didn't know what to say. So, thank you. Thank you. That's one of the lighter sections of the book. There are darker sections elsewhere, but we won't go there. I wanted to thank you so much. I want to open the floor to any questions that anyone has, but before I do, I have a special guest I want to introduce. Many years ago, I wrote a one-man show on J.M. Barrie, of whom I'm very fond, and the first production happened in Louisville, Kentucky, and it was later done off-Broadway at the Lambs Theater, and the actor who played Barrie is here today, Paul Collins, who happens also to live up in the Garrison Cold Spring area. But Paul has something extra special. Aside from playing Barrie in my one-man play on Barrie, Paul was the original voice of John Darling in the Walt Disney animated Peter Pan. So, so if you have any questions for me or Paul about his experience with Mr. Disney, please feel free to ask whatever you would like. There's a microphone here if we need that. Yes?
So, did you read Peter Pan? Well, actually, how old were you when Peter Pan?
How old was I when I first read Peter Pan? It was read to me when I was a child, 3 years old by my mother. But it wasn't really the real Peter Pan. It was the golden book of the Disney version. And she read it to me so many times that one night my mother said to me, I said, I want to hear it again. She said, I'm tired. And I said, well, I'll read it to you. And then I proceeded to read it back to my mother at age 4, and she was immensely impressed. But of course, I couldn't read it all. I just memorized it from hearing it so often, and I knew the cue to turn the page. So I didn't really... Probably my first real exposure, was the Mary Martin musical on television. But I didn't see the play till many, many years later. I probably was introduced to Barrie's other work before I really got to know Peter Pan extremely well. I saw a production of What Every Woman Knows at Actors Theatre of Louisville that just blew me away. And I said, I have to know more about this man's writing. So I went to the library in Louisville, and they had a collected works of J.M. Barrie, and I checked it out and read it cover to cover and just fell in love with play after play after play after play. Anyone else? Yes? Who's the audience for my book? Well, I wrote it really for adults, but I think it's certainly suitable for young adults. You know, I think anybody age 12 and up or even probably somewhat younger would be fine reading it. There are some very obscure sexual references in it, but it's so obscure that if the reader doesn't know what's going on, they won't know what's going on. So that's for the adults to enjoy. Hook has his first wet dream, thinking about Tinkerbell, but that's all we'll talk about. Any other questions?
So I guess Hook didn't understand the sexual references.
No, he had not a clue what this was. Yes, someone raised their hand over here. Oh.
So I'm already imagining this staged. Who would you select to play Hook, and who would you select to play Peter Pan?
I don't imagine this on the stage yet.
Oh no!
Because I wrote this, when I wrote this, it came to me so much as a novel that I haven't been able to move on from that yet. Maybe eventually that will happen, but I don't know. I'll be happy with anybody who wants to do it. Almost anybody. Yes, Beth.
Hey, John, once you got the idea and got started, what research did you have to do, if any?
I knew Barrie's work so well, and I knew Peter Pan by that time so well. Basically, what I did was I reread Peter and Wendy, which is the novelization that Barrie wrote of the play, because that's essentially what the book was based on. Although the novelization is obviously very close to the play, but is even more detailed than the play. But I was so familiar with everything. It just, I had to do some research on clipper ships and, the kinds of ships that have, because Hook sails in 1874, so what ships were sailing the seas from England at that point and so forth and so on. But, yes.
It might be premature, John, but would you ever consider reading it for Audible.com?
I did the audiobook.
You did it?
Yes, that's right. So you can also get the audiobook recorded by me, available now at
Fantastic.
your local bookstores. Fantastic. I don't think there are any of those here tonight, but anyone else?
You keep getting these flash ideas. Are there others? I know Agnes was one. This is another one. Are there other things that you've done?
Flash ideas. No, I don't know. I don't. When things come like that suddenly, this came to me much faster than Agnes of God did. Agnes took a while to develop in my dreams, but this kind of came like that. And that's a gift, and I don't say that I'm blessed to have been the recipient of that gift. I don't say that it will ever necessarily happen to me again. And it's a wonderful thing when it does happen, but it doesn't prove anything about the quality of a book. Some people work very... Moby Dick was not a flash. He took many years. Yes?
John, when is your next cruise?
I don't know when the next cruise is. We'll see.
John, why wasn't it called Peter's Tale or Tiger Lily's Tale? You have an affinity for Hook or not? How did that start?
Because Hook's the hero.
For you.
He is. This is the true story. You don't understand.
Hey,
this
John.
wasn't a choice on my part. I found this manuscript. Yes.
Hey, John, I don't want to ruin for everyone, but this is the first novel where every major character dies at the end. Oops. Sorry. Kidding. No, I mean the mechanics. How many rewrites did you do? How long did it take you from when you first started writing the novel to
I
when
wrote
you
this
finished?
it came to me very, very quickly. And again, this happened, it was a gift. It's not, I don't say this with any pride, it's just, I wrote the first draft in 5.5 weeks. And it just poured out of me. But I was blessed with a wonderful editor, John Glynn, who helped me through the various stages of it, and what remains, what's here today John has a lot to do with also.
John,
Yes.
I was curious, when did you get the feeling that this should be from his voice as opposed to someone?
It's a true story. I found the manuscript. It was in the first person. Barrie, the serious answer to that, the alternate answer to that, is that J.M. Barrie has often been described by many people whom I believe don't really understand him as the boy who never grew up. And I believe that J.M. Barrie was a boy who grew up way too fast. Barrie himself, I think, envisioned himself as Hook when he first created the tale that became Peter Pan with the Llewellyn Davis boys. The character wasn't called Hook at the time, but Barrie sort of played this evil captain when he was playing with the boys, and I think that's Barrie. That's J.M. Barrie. Yes.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Can you describe any difference between writing a play, all your plays, and then writing your first novel?
Well, what was great about this was that no one was looking over my shoulder. You know, I especially if I'm writing for television. I mean, theater and film and television, which I do love writing for, is very much a collaborative process. I'm part one, but there's a lot of other parts that go into making the movie and the play or whatever. And that's great. That's what I love about it. I love working with other people putting this big project together. But when I wrote a novel, I was the only one in the sandbox, and that was fun. I liked that, and I didn't have to answer to anybody else while I was writing it, and I could sort of just let myself loose there. Any other questions? Is that good? Thank you again so much for coming. I'll be signing books in the back, and I'm so glad to see all of you here. Thank you.
Well, John, I wonder if you could stay with us. Yes. So, John, that was what an enchanting story, literally. And I think we can't wait to delve into Neverland. And we're really so honored that you chose the General Society to launch your book. So thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. John, on occasions like this, we like to mark the event. And to present you with a citation, we have our Executive Director, Victoria Dengel.
Thank you. And John, thank you. That was delightful, an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Really, it is so exciting to have you here. So, on behalf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, founded 1785, we express our gratitude to John Leonard Pielmeier, author of Hook's Tale, for his participation in the General Society Labor, Literature, and Landmark Lecture Series. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so fantastic.
And
And because, well, we get very attached to people who come here, so because we also have the perfect place for you to begin writing your second novel. So we've made you a lifetime member of the General Society.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Horace Greeley will be in the back too, I
Yes,
think.
exactly. And speaking of being in the back, I just want to remind you that this wonderful book will be on sale at the back, and Edward will be awaiting you, and John is now going to go, well, really, to the front of the room to sign books. So I hope you'll join us, and also stay for a glass of wine. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you.